Awesome. Welcome everyone to the OpenShift Commons Validated Patterns SIG. I'm not going to say I'm your host because I'm not. Karina is. I'm just introducing everyone. We're going to follow up with what we started last week and introduce just the concepts as far as validated patterns go. I think that this will be about half the call. It might be extended depending on how long the questions go with this. But the main goal of today is really following up and finishing our complete deployment. After that's done, I see that there's already a question in there. We're happy to take others and discuss the patterns in general and where we can take this in the future. How do we ensure that it's not just this team within Red Hat doing all the presenting, talking about use cases, talking about how configurations work or how we're going through these deployments, what can be enhanced within these technologies, or just the decisions being made. But this is the introduction of this call specifically. We can ask questions here too. Absolutely. And we do have the notes doc. I'm assuming that you all have access to it since you have access to the calendar invite. So as we go along, if you'd like to take notes or add into that, please feel free to. I don't know if we need a specific notes taker this time, but Dwayne did a fantastic job last time as a note. With that, Jonny, are you ready to continue?
Sure.
Great. Then over to you.
Yep. All right, cool. So for those that don't know, I'm Jonny. I work on the validated patterns team with William, Anthony, Martin, Lesser, and Michele. And yeah, so last week or before Thanksgiving, we did a quick walkthrough of the validated patterns, kind of like the reasoning behind them. So and like the reasoning behind their existence, why we're like driving them forward, and we started to deploy some configurations with OpenShift pipelines. And so I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to kick this thing back off. All right, let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
I'm assuming you can. Okay, cool. So just to go back over the architecture, we can actually, this thing is dead, so we don't even have to worry. This yellow box no longer exists. It better not. All right, so we have two clusters. We have Commons 0 and Commons 1, and this is really like our just management cluster that we have. So just imagine it would be like your admin cluster or your core cluster, something like that. Red equals control plane, green equals compute, and the one that we had earlier for the demo, that was just a hosted control plane, so using Hypershift. And then our Commons 1 cluster is built exactly the same for simplicity. And so what we discussed last week is when we deploy the pattern onto our cluster, an Argo CD gets provisioned that's scoped at the cluster level, and that creates things like applications, operator groups, subscriptions, namespaces. So imagine things that need to happen at the cluster level. That's what this guy right here would do. And then we provision another Argo CD, which is based off of the cluster group name. So here we have hub, but that's not to be confused with ACM hub. This is really just a name. It's a label for the cluster that you're deploying to. And so generally speaking, we keep it hub for this level one, or this primary cluster here. And what this does is it deploys all the other stuff, right? So all the glue code that you might have, config maps, secrets, deployments, that type of thing, instances of the operator. So say if you've created an ODF, or if you're trying to install ODF and you want to install like a specific storage cluster or something like that, then you would put it in within the realm of this Argo CD. And so if you look, this is more like an Argo of Argo type of deployment, right? So we have an Argo that manages an Argo, and then this box right here represents an application, right? And then that would be, if you're familiar with the paradigm of app of apps in GitOps, then that's exactly what this is. This is the root app, right? Like the meta app that does it. It creates the namespaces and all the stuff that we talked about, and then the downstream, the of apps part of that is what would get provisioned by the hub ACM, or not ACM, I'm sorry, but the hub OpenShift GitOps. And then once you've got your pattern deployed, if you had another cluster, you could import it via ACM, and then you would apply a label to it. And what will happen is an ACM policy if you're using ACM, will get applied to the Commons 1 cluster, and then it'll install OpenShift GitOps, and it'll also install like that root application, and then basically restart the whole thing. Now, what's cool is what we can describe what goes on each one of these clusters, and we do that by going within a Git repo. So if I do a git remote -v, you can see that my repo is pointing to my account, and then this is just a, I forked multi-cloud GitOps into Commons demo. And so if I want to describe that hub cluster, right, I can just take a look at vim values hub. And so again, we provide a list of namespaces, and we're telling Argo CD like, hey, I want you to go and provision these namespaces. We want these subscriptions installed. So in this case, we want ACM. And where we left off last week is we deployed the pipelines operator. And so we're telling Argo to create an operator with the name OpenShift pipelines operator dash Red Hat or RH, and then put it in the OpenShift operators namespace. Now, what this is really doing is this is installing the subscription out of the OLM, and it's going to install the operator group if it needs one, and then all the core things that come with OLM deployments of operators. That's what gets deployed. And then next, we're describing this project here is really the Argo CD project, and so now we're starting to get into describing the application and how the application gets presented to the clusters. And so in this case, we're saying, I want a hub project, I want a config demo, and I want a hello world, and I also want a pipelines project. And so we also have shared values. So if we want to, if you're familiar with Helm, it's not, yes.
Can you make the text bigger?
Maybe. Is that better?
Works great to me.
Thank you.
Okay. Yep. No, thank you. But yeah, so if you're familiar with Helm, then you know that it's not easy. It's actually not doable to use a variable for a variable. So if I have a parameter called hello, I can't have a variable that's like another variable to maybe pull a dynamic thing down. And so what we've done is we've made some of these values files actual templates, and so that allows us that capability to get some of those dynamic parameters. Right, and then the next set is this is the application section, and again, this is still an Argo CD resource, and so now we're telling Argo like, hey, I want to deploy an application called ACM. Well, this is really just a hash, so we're saying deploy an application called ACM, and then put it in this namespace. I want it to go into this Argo CD project, which is hub, and within this Git repository, you can find the charts under common/ACM. And then this is really just for visual, right? So if the desired manifest and the actual manifest are different because of whatever resource, sometimes when you create a Kubernetes resource, an additional field might get applied. Argo CD will show that as out of sync. And so we can apply an ignore differences tag here that will basically say, mind your business, and it'll move on. And so where we left off last week is we added that operator. And so now what we want to do is we want to start configuring the pipelines operator and just add some stuff. We'll do just some very basic stuff. Now,
since you just went through the recap, is it a good time to ask for questions based on the things we did 2 weeks ago?
That's what I was gonna. Yep, that's what I was gonna do.
Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you.
No, it's your show. Go for it. I mean,
no, it's your flow.
I don't want to talk anymore.
Okay.
No,
well, that being the case, no. Karina mentioned that it's a good time to call out tomorrow's community call on OpenShift cluster management. Something that if people are more interested in hearing more about that, it wouldn't be a bad thing to go and attend the OpenShift Commons call tomorrow.
Yeah, and shameless plug as well. If you also have time, on the Asking OpenShift admin, we have the advanced cluster manager team coming on, and they're going to do some demos. They're going to deep dive into ACM, and they're going to deep dive. They've got a demo that they're going to do with like ACM inspection, and so that should be pretty cool. So yeah, if you got time tomorrow, check it out. And then the OpenShift Commons is like right after that, so you don't even have to leave.
With that in mind, do we have any questions based on what Jonny presented 2 weeks ago, or started to go through the recap today? Just to set the stage, because he's going to continue on beyond this, but we want to make sure that we're all at the same level set of what we've done thus far. So I interrupted you for nothing. Sorry, Johnny.
Hey, used to
Please
it.
continue.
It's okay. No big deal. All right. So we've got the pipelines operator installed, and we can tell by this is my common zero cluster. And if I look at the installed operators, as part of the pattern deployment, we deploy the patterns operator. We deploy OpenShift GitOps, and then Advanced Cluster Manager gets deployed. It's optional. We use it because we use multi-cluster, and it makes a ton of sense to use it when you're doing multi-cluster. And so with Advanced Cluster Manager, it deploys the multi-cluster engine. And for those that are curious, this is how you would enable, or within this multi-cluster engine is where you would enable Hypershift. And then as part of our demo from the last time, we installed OpenShift pipelines. Now, if we go over to, I don't see it. All right, well, I don't see it. So we'll go ahead and create it. So all it's done is create the operator. And so what we'll do now is we will add a Tecton config to OpenShift pipeline. So if we go to charts and then all, we'll make a directory called pipelines. Oh, almost typed undo because I was like, undo that. So the easiest way to do this is to actually do a copy minus R and then common examples blank. So what we've done is we've put a blank Helm chart that you can use as just like a bare bones template that you can copy into your repo. And so I'm just going to copy that here as pipelines. All right, and if you look, like this is literally just like the most vanilla Helm chart you could possibly have. So if you go into templates, there's really nothing here. So if we cat manifest, just so you can see, like it's just vanilla. So we'll delete this, and I'm going to copy in. Let's see. Just kidding. Demo stuff. Tecton config. And if I knew how to use Linux, I'd have to tell it where to go. So if we just take a look at this, it's just all we're doing is we're applying a specific configuration to Tecton. So just a couple fancy things. So now what we can do is git add. And adding. All right, and now I'm going to update the values hub. And the easiest way to add an application is just to copy and paste from when that exists, so that way you can just override. And so we'll just call this Tecton. Namespace, and we'll put this in OpenShift pipelines. And we'll make this part of the pipelines project. Now, again, when we're looking at this, right? So this is the Argo CD project. This is the namespace that we want the resource deployed in. The name of the application that we want to get deployed. So when we look at it in Argo, this is what we're going to see. And then this path here is where we're telling Argo CD, like, where in the Git repo can I find this resource? And since we've already created that. Yeah.
Really quickly on that, I see chart/all, and I've seen chart/hub. Can you go through that?
Yeah. So this is really just it's really for organization. So all it just means it really could mean anything. You can have region. In DevSecOps, we actually separated by like cluster, right? Which cluster do we want us to go to? Just so you can. It's just for organization. So it's a label.
That could be where you put the development or a factory or whatever. But all might imply there that you're going to put pipelines in all clusters. And I know we're putting it there now, and it's only a directory name, but you probably wouldn't be putting pipelines in something called all, because you wouldn't want pipelines on every cluster, right?
Right.
If
Right.
all meant every cluster, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and this is really all about just overusing all now, but yeah, this is really like the way that you can consume the charts, right? Like the way
Right.
that you want to organize them in your environment. Like we have all, and we have region. Others we have like
We have
dev, QA, hub, etc.
production, whatever. Yeah.
Yep. But the real meat and potatoes, like where everything actually goes, is based off of these values file, right? And based off of within that values file is based off of the actual cluster group name, right? So going back into values hub, yeah. So the reason why we don't have to apply namespace or anything right now is because we, in the last session that we had, we already created the OpenShift pipelines namespace, and we had actually already deployed the OpenShift pipelines operator.
Question. Sorry, Johnny.
Yes.
One more question, because it might be important. All might be a special one. Does the framework apply anything that's in all to hub or factory or whatever? Like, is all a special one compared
No.
to others? Are you sure?
Yeah.
So how does it pick up all? Because we don't have all. We don't have a values all, do we?
No,
Okay.
we don't.
So
It's just a directory, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So then he's associating all with the actual application being deployed, right? It's just a name.
Yeah.
that
Like
we're organizing.
like this could be apps, right? Instead of all. And then we could just have all of our apps under apps, right? I mean, it's literally just telling Argo CD where in the Git repo that path is, or that chart is located. All right, so with that, take a look at what we got. So let's git add values hub. The worst part of this is you guys get to watch me type, which is terrible. So all right, so cool. So now that I've pushed that to Git, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up to Argo CD, and we can see that it's already picked it up, right? So like we caught it right in the middle of the reconciliation. So we should see what's happening here. Yep. So it's already synced. So it created the new namespace, or not new namespace, but it created the new or refresh the object. And then now over in our application Argo, we can see that the Tecton config application has been created. We can see that the Tecton config has been applied. It's creating a bunch of resources on its own. And if we take a look at the application, and if you remember, we're saying, hey, we wanted that Tecton config in OpenShift pipelines. We wanted it to find the manifest and the charts all in pipelines path. It's using my my branch that I declared, and it's also using my repo, right? So this all gets, these two variables here specifically get they get pulled in when we do the make install. So they get read from the system from your Git repository, and then pull them in, or from your session rather. All right, and so pretty soon this is going to finish deploying, and everything's going to be happy, or it's going to be miserable. But you can see we just applied that Tecton config, and we didn't really go onto the cluster and do anything. So all we did was add it to Git, and the controller now is going out and saying, hey, I'm different from what you have on the cluster. Let me go ahead and apply what you're supposed to have. And now we can start seeing all these things like cluster tasks and stuff like that getting deployed. So now what we'll do is we'll just go and we'll extend this just a little bit more, right? So let's add like a really super basic pipeline. And because William made a good point about the path, let's go to charts, and let's just make dir, and we'll call it let's just call it apps. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy -r, common examples, blank, to say what.
Of
All right,
course,
copy.
awesome Say What app.
That's right. Demo stuff. And then it's going to be pipeline. Oh, come on. All right. So if I wanted to, mommy. So we're going to create, all right. My mouse and Tmux is going crazy. All right. So we're going to create a namespace called say hello. Now, what I would do if this, if we were going to go through this, like I'd start parameterizing these things. So these would be values that I would put in my values file, or maybe, if they're scoped globally, I'd put them in like a higher level values file that would get applied at the root of the Git repo. But just for the sake of time and just to show something simple, we're going to create a namespace called say hello. All right, git root. And then I'm going to go back into values hub. And I'm not even listening to myself here. So let me do this. I'm going to copy and paste. And we're going to put this in a say hello namespace. And we're going to create a project called say what. And instead of it being an all, we'll say it's in apps and then say what. All right. And so now what we want to do is we want to add it to the list of projects. And then we want to add a namespace called say hello. All right. And now we'll save that. All right, so now that we've pushed it into Git, we can come over to our cluster level Argo, and I'm gonna refresh. And we can see it's out of sync. And the reason why it's out of sync is because it's like, okay, now I've got a difference. I'm supposed to create a new namespace, and I've got some projects that I need to create, and I've got that application that I need to create within Argo CD. So we can see we've got our say hello namespace. Now we go back over to our application Argo, and we can see that we've got our say what application. All right, and that say what application is creates a pipeline. This task, I don't know why it keeps saying it's out of sync, but let's take a look actually. All right, because it's declaring a string and I'm declaring a 0, like an int. So yeah, that's easy to fix. I won't worry about that right now. But yeah, so now if we go back over to OpenShift, to OpenShift in the cluster, we can go to pipelines. Let's actually switch to this say what or say hello namespace. And then we'll go to pipelines. And then we can see that we have our pipeline here. So we'll click on that and then let's start it. And so what's going on now is this task or this pipeline is going through and it's running these two tasks, right? So the two tasks are say something or the task is say something, but within it, it's got 2 steps. So one step is hello from step 1, and the other one is hello from step 2. So if we go back to pipeline runs, hello, this is the first task, and then hello, this is the second task. So that's how you would extend the pattern. All right, so that's how you add a new application to it. If you wanted to add a new operator, again, you just go into Values Hub. You describe the namespaces that you want, the subscriptions that you want, and then from the Argo perspective, you describe the projects, the applications, and then you tell it where in the repo that is. And you can either have the charts local in your repo, or you can actually declare like a Helm chart that might exist out in another Helm repository. So maybe you want to pull down the Cockroach DB Helm chart that exists out, on the internet somewhere, and you can map to that. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the nickel tour of validated patterns, and extending. Hopefully you found it useful. Are there any questions?
I'll just say one more thing in addition to what Jonny said. He was adding Helm charts and Helm things into the pattern. If you have, for example, an application that's customized, you could actually add that as well into the Values Hub or Values file and deploy that as well by describing it in there as well. Just so in case you have customized applications that you want to onboard, you can do the same thing.
And we're not going to do the customized versus Helm debate here today.
Yeah, that's pretty much on par with GNOME and KDE.
And Vim and Nano.
Well, there's really no argument there. It's always Vim. Yeah.
I use Emacs. Oops. Just throw more into the fire.
You should be able to use both, right?
I'm just fixing it so that
sync it up.
Yep. Yeah.
Jonny, within the framework, we were going almost exclusively through declarative and GitOps, but in your configuration file, you actually showed there was an imperative section. Is there anything you want to call out in that?
Yeah, so the imperative section, we talked about it the last time a little bit, but yeah, the imperative section is really, when you think about like all of your applications, right? Most times we're doing OC apply, OC create, OC replace, that type of thing. Sometimes when you're deploying operators and these configs in a GitOps fashion, we're trying to get away from that, right? We're trying to get away from that hand jamming or that one-off config where I just go in and make a little change. And so the imperative framework is something that we put in place to allow you to maybe have a playbook or something like that you want to run. Maybe you have a script that you want to run that would run on a cron that does backups and stuff like that. So instead of you going in and doing it manually, you can add it into this imperative framework. Additionally, with the imperative framework, you can run jobs, and then you can use those as like your one-shot kind of thing. So like ODF. ODF, if you go through the GUI and you install the operator, you can select the nodes. But if you're trying to do this declaratively, then you actually have to label the nodes first. And generally that's an OC node or OC label node with a label. And so you can use jobs or one-time pods and stuff like that to go out and make that change for you. And so really just it's taking those things that you would do on the keyboard and throwing it into a Kubernetes resource or into the imperative framework via shell script or Ansible playbook that gets applied to the cluster. So that way you're not actually going on the cluster and making changes. And the security benefit of that, right, is you're reducing the amount of people that actually have hands-on access to the cluster, because now you're keeping all of your control back in Git, right? So I'm just creating this job. In general, you'd provision the RBAC and stuff like that goes along with that task that you're trying to do.
Hey, Jonny,
yes.
We use a lot of, the framework does a lot of handling of secrets and stuff, right?
Yep.
And I'm not talking about just external secrets. I'm talking about other secrets as well, right? And
yep.
We normally store secrets in appropriate namespaces. But seeing that Anthony brought up imperative, there's one default sort of or important secret that gets set up. Is it the vault one that's set up in imperative?
Yes.
Secret? Yeah. Do you want to show that really quick, just as a side note?
Yep. Let's see if I can find it.
Well, you can also look at it in the.
Oh, you were actually one. Yeah.
In OpenShift, it's might be. So when you're looking for the there it is, yeah. When you're looking for the secret to get into Vault, right?
Yep. So if you're trying to access Vault, we store the keys. So full disclosure, we're not deploying like a production level Vault. We're deploying a single instance of Vault that we unlock as the cluster comes up, and we actually use the imperative framework to run a cron job to keep it open, so that way you can use it through the demo. So like, if you were to take this and try and apply it, you would want to you would want to rebalance this and get this production ready. You don't want the Vault to be constantly opened by this cron job. You'd want to use some kind of key manager or something like that. But just for the sake of showing you how you can implement Vault as a secrets manager along with ESO and stuff like that, that's the purpose of this. So if we look at Vault keys and YAML, I think this isn't it.
No, you go you just do reveal values and go to go in.
Yeah, wait, is that
Go
it?
down to
Oh no.
reveal values. Don't look at the YAML, man.
Why did I do that? Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry, you're right.
Values and scroll down a little bit. And
Yep. And so you can see the root token is here. And so now what we'll do is we'll go over to networking. I don't know what I was trying to do there.
Actually, just go up to the 3x3, the 9 boxes. And
I always forget about this. Right, and then under secret, and then we have global, and then we have config demo. So config demo is our only application right now that's using the secret, or that's using the Vault as a backend. Or I'm sorry, my goodness, that's using a Vault secret. So if we go to config demo, we can see that we have our external secret, and within this external secret, there's going to be a reference to the actual secret itself. All right, so we have our config demo secret. It's extracting it from this backend store. So we correlate that over to, so we have secret data global. So we have secret and global, so data is part of the default path. And then we have config demo, right? So we can see that this key here aligns with what's in the Vault. And where this all gets set is if we're in the root of our Git repo, we have this template. Oh, that was not cool. All right, so we have our secrets for the key, the root key, and then our name is config demo. It's going to go in it's going to have the global prefix. The field name is going to be secret. If it's not there, if we didn't provide a value, right? So if value wasn't here with something that we put in, then we're saying, hey, if that's missing, go ahead and generate it using our validated pattern default policy. And the default policy is your standard, difficult password, right? Like I think it's 15 characters, numbers, uppercase, lowercase, special characters, that type of thing, with the exception of the $, because when we're passing some of these one-shot jobs that they're using shell to do like database uploads and stuff like that, the $, it makes it difficult. And so we took the $. So basically any special character except for the $, it applies. And then that password is what you can use, and we'll see it here. Let's just take a look. So you can see we've got all kinds of stuff in here.
So Johnny, if you wanted to actually not generate it, I don't know if this is for another day, or do you want to just quickly show how you would have a values file in your home directory? And
yeah,
do you want to do that a different day, all the secrets handling stuff, or do you want to just
let's do that, because that's a little bit more involved when
fair.
Yeah, because then we could go into the config demo, config map, and all that stuff, and start changing stuff around.
Yeah. Okay, cool. More questions, folks? Our thoughts? Johnny, I know you've been looking at pipelines, and I'm glad you picked that one, because it's actually a really useful one to talk about. Are there, you did a silly little first step, second step there. Are there, are there sort of well-known or useful pipelines out there? Do you want to talk really quickly about some of that, or no?
Yeah, I mean, so it's like everything else. There's a ton. If you go to Tecton Hub, if you go to I can't remember what the one for our OpenShift is, but it might be OpenShift Pipelines Hub or something like that. Pipelines Hub. But you can find, like generic pipelines and tasks and stuff like that. That maybe like, oh, I want to set SSH on all of my pods for whatever reason. Go look in Tecton Hub, and there's probably already a task that you can pull down that has that, like, all the steps already involved. And so all you have to do is copy that in, or even just reference it, and then it'll pull it in when the pipeline is running.
So one of the things that we're working on internally, and Lester's working on it right now, is we're trying to take one of the sort of Red Hat secure software supply chain with secure content pipelines, and we're trying to bring that into our DevSecOps pattern. We have some of it there today, but there's going to be updates to that, which does, content signing and attestation and all that good stuff within it as well. So that's good.
Yeah. And there's a ton out there. So that I was going to mention the DevSecOps one, but I was like, I don't know if that was a little too presumptuous to start tooting my own horn on that, or to toot our own horn on that. But yeah, so DevSecOps is a good one. Gerald Nunn has done some really good ones with Argo workflows, or Argo rollouts, and OpenShift pipelines together. So that's pretty cool. And again, this is Tecton Hub. And so, like, say if I wanted a task that goes out and it creates a pull request for me. I can just copy all this content into my repo and use it, or I can reference it within my pipeline to go out and pull it down. And then what I need to do is I'll need to set some of these parameters so that way it'll be successful. And then this task, when it's executed, it'll generate a pull request on the target repo. So there's tons of stuff out here. It's all really awesome. I'll find the one for OpenShift pipelines because I can't remember what it is right now. So with that, I'll stop sharing.
Karina's added a poll for the next topic. So I think that's down in the bottom right-hand corner. There should be some shapes, and there's a poll there if you want to.
Nice. I was actually hoping to get people's thoughts beyond just the list for the next topic, because we do have a couple that we might be able to get into. But was this useful? Do you think that this was too high level, too low level? Do you want it more in depth? I mean, what are you looking for from this conversation that we can make sure that we're setting things correctly? So
while people are thinking of that, Anthony, did you want to maybe pull up the validatedpatterns.io/patterns page and talk about some of the additions or anything like that, or updates?
I was considering the other thing I was going to actually do and have up right now, so you can see while I share my screen here, is the currently available library that we have and the partners that we're working with. This shouldn't be, as far as a SIG goes, I'm not looking this to be just completely Red Hat. So if you'd like to present on your specific configuration, your architecture, your use case, we're happy to have anyone who'd like to share and get feedback and have a discussion around your use cases included. When you look at the website, the validatedpatterns.io site, you'll see all of these individual patterns: the connected vehicle, the retail edge, Calm Gateway, multi-cloud GitOps with Portworx, a number with partners, a number that we've kind of worked on our own. We've just started over the last several months engaging with partners as far as testing goes. Inside of our external website, we have a CI page that shows you the status of our current continuous integration testing. And Nutanix is doing this on their own, testing our multi-cloud GitOps with their hardware and their configurations. We're hoping to do more. We see Intel AMX here. Intel's in the process of developing a number of patterns with the AMX performance accelerators included in them. You see on the left side, the maintain validated patterns, we have a medical diagnosis one. They've gone through and created an accelerator based on their hardware acceleration for that AI model. So there's some really fun things that are being worked on right now. I see William tossed in the chat the ML ops, or fraud detection, one that's being worked on. I think that would be fun to talk about as well. But my main goal in this is to have a community where we can all share ideas and talk about different use cases. What's the pros and the cons other than Nano and Vim? Kind of getting into some of the technology and get your thoughts on that too.
Can I add something to that, Anthony? One of the things I'd say is that these patterns are not set in stone, right? The idea is that we have domain experts. We're not the domain experts on these things. Like we really don't know a lot about emerging disease detection. However, we do know a little bit about that pattern. However, if you're looking at that pattern, or you're looking at the MLOps fraud detection or whatever, and you see, oh, you know what? There's been an update to this particular project or product, and there's a new feature there, and this pattern would benefit from that. We would love people to make updates and do pull requests for the patterns and see if we can keep these things alive and changing and updating and getting better and better. So, for example, in the MLOps fraud detection, there's use of ML flow and stuff like that. Now, we're not sure that ML flow is going to be what we're going to be using for model repositories in the future, and that might get updated when things change. So there's certain things, for example, that are community right now in our pattern that might end up being done by a product, and maybe it's a partner product, and someone might want to do a pull request that says, oh, I've seen you have this here, but you should be, here's an example of it being used with a product from such and such a company, right? Those sort of things are what we would love for the community, particularly this community, to be confident that, hey, we can make changes and make impact on these patterns and upgrade them and update them. So even if you're not contributing a pattern, you can be contributing advancements and new features to patterns, and we'd love to see that. Our updated demo to make it even better, right? So if you see that all we have is something like Hello World, and you think, oh my gosh, this particular demo would make this pattern even cooler, feel free to do a pull request.
Thanks for pointing that out, William. As you mentioned, here's the validated pattern site. So you're able to see it's just validatedpatterns.io. On our status page, it shows all of our current testing, the patterns, their current status, and what they're tested on. So testing yesterday with DevSecOps on Google Cloud with OpenShift 4.12. It's the main branch because we do have the ability to go with GA pre-release testing, or, well, I'll click on all so you can see all. Quite a bit more testing when we go into all. Included in that is, let's see, I know I saw, when I looked at it this morning, I saw Nutanix in here.
You can go by pattern.
Maybe that's the easier way. Yeah. There you are.
And we also show by, like, the platform there is the is AWS, GCP, Azure, and Nutanix, right?
Can you show how to start the process of suggestion for a pattern? Well, we do have the contribute aspect that's inside here, and a couple different articles associated with it. You can create a pattern on your own, or you can work with the team to do that. William, from your perspective, or Johnny or Lester, if we're starting a pattern, there's a number of ways we can go about that, right?
Yeah, what I would say is, from my experience working with others, what they've usually done is use this guide to, fork or create from a template a new sort of pattern, blank pattern, and then do what Johnny was doing, where you add the namespaces and the operators, the subscriptions, and the applications, and then you add the charts, and you do that. And then one of the things that what I've seen so far, for example, with the ML fraud detection and with the emergent disease control, is people built these things and then they sort of reached out to us and said, hey, I've got this pattern and it's kind of finished, or I need a little bit more help getting it finished or whatever. And then once we decide that, hey, this is awesome, we have sort of two choices around that. You can either leave it in your own repo and we'll still sort of we'll try to get you to add documentation here so it shows up on the validated patterns page and we point to your repo. Or you can, if you want to make sure that it has maybe more longevity than your interest, you can transfer the repo, the pattern repo, over to the validated patterns organization, and then it'll sort of live over there forever as well. But that's kind of the way you want to do it. If you need help with the, getting started type of thing beyond the documentation, yeah, do feel free and reach out to us, and we can sort of help you with that process. But a lot of people have just sort of, got the repos, made a fork or whatever, or from a template, created something, and then started building it out, and then reached out to us and said, hey, I think I have something here. Do you want it? And we can talk about trying to get it into the documentation here.
Absolutely. And one thing to keep in mind, when you're setting up a pattern, you're either looking for the deployment aspect or you're looking to have it be included in our testing. If you're looking for the testing part, we need a demo. We can't test if it's just deploying a number of services out in a specific config, because our goal is not to just do deployment testing. We're looking to exercise all the APIs, or at least the functionality of your use case. So that demo is going to run through what you would standardly see in that configuration, in that use case. So having that demo allows us to test the validity of all the interactions inside that config when it's going through its deployment, as well as the functionality afterwards when we put it into our CI.
And another point on that, Anthony, is this testing is expensive, right? So what is the most desirable, and we've said it's required for us to do the testing, is that there's a customer or two out there that are using, not obviously exactly the demo that you're doing, but the demo is showing the architecture, the number of products that the customer has deployed. And that way, the value of this, by the way, is if you do have a customer that has a particular architecture that you want to move into a pattern because you want to make sure that a product update doesn't break it, right? So your customer, your valued customer, or maybe you are a customer, and you want to make sure that, hey, this combination of products, when one of these things change, we don't want it to break our whole pattern. We don't want to download it and discover things are broken. Then that's the value of us doing the testing. We make sure that we notify the product teams and say, hey, did you know that your new version of whatever has just broken the industrial edge pattern or the medical diagnosis pattern or whatever? And that way we can preempt some of the frustration that customers have with those combination of products in that particular way. So that's the value of doing the testing. But as I said, it's expensive. So we would love to have a really valid, out in the fields use case so that we can justify the cost of testing that particular pattern.
As well as working with our partners who are also willing to do some of that testing. It doesn't have to be a completely Red Hat effort. And with that in mind, I'm also tossing out on the screen here the portfolio architecture page, a Red Hat Architecture Center. And these are the documentations and explanations. This is all externally available. So you can parse based on the solution, a vertical, specific products, or on the bottom here, you have portfolio architecture, solution pattern, and validated pattern. Some people have questions on the difference between them. This SIG itself is around use cases and architectures. So we'll be talking through all of these at one point or another. The way I differentiate it is generally the portfolio architecture is at a very high level, a 10,000 or 40,000 foot view, looking at the solution as a whole, defining what the different components are, how they interact, but it's not a specific implementation. So it's not giving you instructions on how to deploy this. There's no GitHub or reference architecture that does that. The validated patterns takes that a steps further And we use configurations as code, this Argo that we've been talking about, to deploy these configs so that you have your proof of concept or instant on environment to test and to try things out, as well as it being modular so that we can shift things in and out as needed. The solution patterns, the last one here, is around ready-made use cases, but generally just a configuration as code when it was deployed for a reference architecture. So a snapshot, this solution's interesting, we're going to show you how to deploy it, but that we're just not going to maintain it over time. You have an SLA associated with it. It may or may not work, but it is an example on how things are done to get to an end goal.
So would it be a good place for, like, if someone wanted to contribute a pattern and they look at this list and they went, oh, this isn't a pattern yet, a validated pattern, but I know about this use case. I could turn this into configuration as code and turn it into a validated pattern?
It can be. This is the Red Hat essentially building block, the use case center that allows us to talk about a number of different ways to deploy things. You know, the PAs are just the documentation of it. Let's document that solution, but you're not going to get instructions on how to do it. You're going to have to figure it out that yourself. The validated pattern is just that step up, I think. We're trying to work together within each of these initiatives. So the validated pattern team is going to leverage what the portfolio architecture team does in this high level view and make it consistent. So it's nice.
If someone contributes it, like we're not
absolutely.
We're not going to go out and do it. That's what I was saying. If someone here
knows
one of these and says, you know what, that's not validated yet. Oh, it should be. You can by all means take one of these and say, hey, I'm going to contribute this and get it in because it's out there in the wild. We've documented, but we don't have the code in. And then it becomes something that's maintained over time.
And yes, we can absolutely work together. As William and Johnny and Lester have mentioned, you engage on the Slack channel, and we'll be happy to help with that, trying to put things into place. But we are not the SMEs. They are experts on a number of topics, but having years and years of industrial edge or disaster recovery experience, you're most likely going to be the experts in these. So we're going to need your SME expertise. And with that, I'm going to stop presenting here. I'm going to toss these in. But there was one question that was asked inside of our notes before we got started. Can validated patterns be used on Microshift, or are they only for OpenShift platforms? Who would like to take that from the team? Don't all jump at once.
I would say I'm gonna stick my neck out here and say no. I mean, you could try it, but good grief. There's Microshift is small. Johnny, yeah, you added, get in there.
Yeah, so out of the box, no, mainly because OLM isn't installed with Microshift, so the operator lifecycle manager. So if you got the manifest to those operators, right, or if you installed OLM, then there's just extra config that would have to be done. But out of the box, it would not run on top of Microshift unless you did like you pulled the manifest out or even did like OLM. But that's why.
That being said, there are two frameworks that the validated patterns team has access to. The one that we've shown today is the OpenShift Argo CD. There is another Ansible-based framework that would work just fine for that.
Okay, well, there's that one. So yeah, okay. Let me eat my words a little bit here. If you're using Ansible, then yes, you can run it on Microshift. I think I haven't used it, so like I'm just boldly going out there and saying, yeah, I think you could with the Ansible one. But if it's deploying any type of operator using OLM, it's no, and that's because of the library's not there. So,
all that being said, we haven't tried it yet. I know there are teams that are considering it, but we haven't invested any time to say yes or no yet.
And remember, the point of these things are really that, if you have a pattern that deploys things out onto Microshift, maybe there's something value in there. But for the most part, these are like real, world use cases for very complex architectures, and they're not really intended to be on Microshift, right? I mean, bring up demo.redhat.com or whatever to do your demos. If the reason you're asking this is because you want to do demos on Microshift, they're not really for that. I mean, these are enterprise patterns, enterprise level architectures. So, but if you have a pattern that uses, edge Microshift things, we'd love to see it. That'd be fantastic.
David, you have a question? Your hand up?
Yeah, I was. Can you hear me? Okay, cool. Thanks. The reason why I was asking for I asked actually the Microshift question on the notes, and the reason why I was asking it is we had this conversation over on the Edge SIG channel with swap, size, weight, and power with emergency management, public safety, and we're trying to figure out, from that perspective, how we can leverage OpenShift, Microshift, whatever platform we want to, and be able to create something that's very easy, or not necessarily easy, so to speak, but very swap centric. Or, let's say I'm going, if you want to cruise the, thing, I, expounded myself and Ben and some other folks over there, expounded on that. And that's what we're trying to figure out is how we can utilize technology in a particular use case so that we can say, hey, we've got it, we can roll with it, et cetera, and still keep within the confines of what we have to work with. Does that make sense, Mr. Herr?
It does. And I think that we'll get there. I don't think it'll be too far before we get to that point that we can have a Microshift pattern. We just haven't created one yet as a foundation, a building block to build use cases on top of.
Yeah, and it's not a demo by any shape of the imagination. This is actually going to be real world applications, and demo perhaps maybe to see if it works, et cetera, for proof of concept. But further down the road, we'd like to use something that's a swap as well as cost prohibitive type, money factor, because obviously disasters are not money trees. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. We are at the top of the hour, but we see two hands up, David and Ben. David, I think you were first.
No, that was mine.
Oh, that was
Mr.
yours.
Herr.
I'm sorry.
That was yours.
I apologize.
I just put it down. Yeah.
You're in two windows. I'm seeing you in two different spots.
David is so excited about this. He joined twice.
There you are. Ben, do you have any final words?
No, I'll just ping in the chat. I'm just gonna keep going on that because I like that edge question. But I'll be on Slack for it.
It sounds great. This has been a fantastic call. We really appreciate the engagement and working with everyone and discussing these use cases. Hopefully you found what the team presented as valuable. And I think we're going to stop here for today and carry this on in 2 weeks. Does that make sense to do one more before the end of the year holiday? Okay.
I think we can fit it in. Although for next time, we'll have to do that async. We have one vote for two things. So nice. All right. Thanks, everybody. It was good to see you, and see you tomorrow. Same time, same channel. Hour earlier is Jonny on the Ask an OpenShift admin. So, all right. See you soon.
Thank you.
See you guys. Thanks.